Recording in progress.
Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome back to School of Speech presented by SpeechTherapyPD. School of Speech is the podcast for all of us school-based SLPs who want to learn boldly, think critically, and really stay grounded in the real work that's happening in our schools every single day. I'm your host, Carolyn Dolby, and I am so glad you're here. This episode is titled Envision Optimizing Assessment and Dismissal Processes in Public Schools. That's us, y'all. Now listen, I already know that this topic is going to hit a nerve for a lot of us school-based SLPs because assessment and dismissals, those conversations can be really complicated. Not because we don't know what we're doing. No, but because these conversations live right in that intersection between data, ethics, parent emotions, team dynamics, district culture, and sometimes our own discomfort with letting a student go. Because let's be honest, many of us are really well trained in how to qualify students, but not always on how thoughtfully and to confidently dismiss them. Somewhere along the line, dismissal, I think, started to feel like it was going to be a conflict, like, oh, or a risk, or maybe it's our failure. No. Dismissal, we need to look at it. It represents growth. It represents progress. It represents independence and also appropriate educational decision making, right? So today I am beyond excited. We are diving into what legally defensible assessments actually look like, how to navigate difficult IEP conversations, and how we can begin shifting towards more intentional and ethical dismissal practices in the schools. And honestly, this is one of those conversations that really has potential to completely change the way we think about our caseloads. All right, I am excited to welcome two guests today, Amy Culligan and Laura Gottlieb. Amy is a speech language pathologist with over 25 years of experience in the school setting, serving a wide range of student populations and programs. In addition to direct therapy, Amy has served as an SLP lead for Long Beach Unified School District for 7 years, where she supported approximately 150 SLPs. Oh my gosh. And SLPAs. Ooh. She facilitated professional development and helped establish district-wide procedures and systems. She also developed an evaluation tool specifically designed for SLPs and created a multi-tiered system of success framework. Thank you, Amy. We're so glad you're here. Laura is a bilingual speech language pathologist with more than 27 years. Oh, she tiny tongued you, Amy, on the years. She has extensive experience supporting districts with large-scale assessment needs and currently works in Long Beach Unified School District, conducting evaluations, focusing on returning students to their least restrictive environment and reducing unnecessary services. Ooh, I'm interested in that. And thoughtful dismissal practices. Amy and Laura, welcome to School of Speech.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. We're delighted to be with you, Carolyn.
Oh my gosh, I can't get enough of you two. I am so excited. Now, before I jump into like some pretty heavy questions, because I've got them here, I'm so excited. I want to remind everybody that this episode is offered for 0.1 ASHA CEUs through SpeechTherapyPD. And if you are listening live, we've got a lot listening live today. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to make sure that everybody gets their credit because, we're learning today. Be sure to complete all the required modules and click complete course before the end of today, people. I want to make sure everyone gets credit. Now, just as a reminder, and those that are returning guests, thanks for returning. And you'll know that sometimes I get a little, I get really excited and sometimes a little excited, and we go a little longer because I just don't want to let my guests go. And so I just get excited for these conversations. And sometimes my episodes can wander slightly past the 60-minute mark. So if you have a time constraint and we've hit the 60 minutes and you need to pop off, please, after the hour, you can always, don't worry, you can pop off and then you just go onto your SpeechTherapyPD account and you'll still get full credit. I get it because I can't stop myself sometimes. But of course, if you can stay, we would love for you to stay live with us. Okay, now, if you are here live and I want everybody here live, get in the chat, tell me where you're at. I'd love to see the School of Speech community, and you guys come from all over, so I always like to see where you're coming from. So while you guys are jumping in the chat, I'm going to go over our disclosures. I am a salaried employee of Portland Public Schools in Portland, Oregon, and I receive compensation from SpeechTherapyPD for hosting School of Speech, which still blows my mind. I love it so much, I can't get enough. Amy and Laura are employees of Long Beach Unified School District, and they have no relevant financial relationships to disclose. Hey, easy peasy, we're done with that. Boom, chakalaka. All right. Let's get started. Oh, hi, everyone. Look at that. Oh, Texas. Ooh, I spent 25 years there. Oh, we got lots of, yeah, Cali, you're friends from Cali. All right, Amy and Laura, let's zoom out, big picture, and jump right into it. Why do you think that dismissal conversations feel so difficult? I mean, why?
They do. So, first of all, Carolyn, thank you so much. Amy and I are super thrilled to be here. We're very geeked out to be here. Thank you to all you who are participating. I know we're having our own festival, being really happy to be together. So, thank you. And that's a great question that you're asking about how do we think about embracing assessment, how we think about exiting students, etc. And let me give you a little bit of background history, and then I'm going to answer your question. So the topic sort of evolved because Amy and I have been thinking about this for a long time. When COVID ended, I would imagine many of your school districts had an abundance of assessments that were needed. So
Yes.
many districts were like, oh, what do we do with all these kids that needed to be tested? And at the time, Amy was our lead. She hired me to take care of a lot of those assessments. And so I went about my job and began doing mass testing, as I would imagine many of you did as well. And as I did so, I started to notice these patterns. Amy and I would have conversations about it, and we started to notice these things, like there was a tremendous amount of over-identification. So again, we started to see things like, is this a language delay or a language disorder? Are we starting to see, like, would some of these problems, maybe they would have been solved by a multi-tiered system of support, MTSS, or a response to intervention, RTI kind of thing? Did they need to be receiving our services and things like that? And we really started to take a hard look at these kids. And I would say to Amy, I don't understand why they're still sitting on caseloads. Why is that? And then more importantly, we started to say, why are SLPs holding on to these kids? Why are they not exiting them? So that became like the big giant question mark, if you will. And so we kind of put this spotlight on this as a topic, right? We said, how do we think about exits? How do we focus our efforts on exiting students? And when we started to really analyze this piece, 4 barriers emerged. All right. And so let me get into that. And I'm wondering, you people out there, all the speechies, I'm wondering, you can pop into the chat. Yep, I see that barrier. I know exactly what you're talking about, because I'm curious if these are barriers that you're seeing too. So the first barrier are sort of those school staff, if you will. So when we're talking about school staff, we're talking about your teachers, we're talking about your principals, we're talking about your counselors, your special education teachers, all well-meaning, all part of our school system, but those became some of the barriers that we were talking about. The second one were family and caregivers. So these again are your well-meaning parents, grandparents. Sometimes it's the uncle that's in special education. Sometimes
Or the aunt who's another speech therapist.
Right,
Yes.
right.
I was
Yeah,
just
I mean,
thinking
and
that.
sometimes it's like the doctor who's maybe had one chapter in communication disorders who's writing a prescription for you to give speech therapy. It's all of these kind of people that are really well-meaning and well-intended, the grandparents, exactly, all that kind of stuff. And then I know, Carolyn, I may stump you on this one. You're not
Okay.
going to believe what our third barrier is.
Look,
You know,
I'm listening in.
I love to stump somebody, but even all of you out there, you're not going to believe it when I say it. So I'm going to name it. But you did say this could be controversial. So here we go. Speech language pathologists. Do you believe it if I said that we can be our own worst enemy? And it's true. We can be our own worst enemy. So we too became a barrier. And then the fourth barrier were the students themselves,
Mhm.
right? They too became like a major barrier, right? And so those were the ones that we started to say when we really locked into, oh, well, this is the reason why we're not doing it. It's because of our teacher. It's because of the student. It's because of us or the parent. Those were those barriers, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I mean, oh my goodness. So Carrie, thank you. She jumped in and she really resonated with the parents because there's a huge, Carrie, I'm going to read what you said because we'll have some people just listening. There is a huge emotional barrier and parents don't always want to get rid of services
Right.
at all. Oh, I hear that all the time, especially with those moderate to severe students. And it's hard to have that conversation with some people that classes can actually provide the supports that they need. Guess what, Carrie? That's going to be answered a little bit later, so don't worry. And I think one thing that I think about that how many people out there have the child has done is in for RTIC and all the goals are met and you're there, you're ready, you have the dismissal and the teacher says, well, I still can't understand him. And you're like thwarted. So hopefully we'll get into that too. So I love that you have the barriers. I love it. But what is that? What does it look like?
Well,
Like,
Carolyn, you did such a, I mean, Amy, we'll talk about this too, but you did such a perfect job. That's exactly right. So it is when those teachers are saying, I'm still hearing the R or
yeah,
something like that, right? Or they're
yeah,
saying, my favorite one, I mean, like, I feel my favorite one was when the teacher like kind of pulled out the card and said, I've been a teacher for a really long time. I think I know when I see a speech kid. It's as if they've been the experts in our field, right? Or you know what, this student is just so quiet. They sit in the back of the room. They
oh,
never raise their as if
mhm,
quiet is a disorder. And I feel like
right,
whipping out the
right,
Susan
like being
Cain book.
shy,
Exactly. Or I'm still hearing them stutter. Right? I'm still hearing the stutter. So these are some of the things. Or maybe
Or when that teacher doesn't name it specifically to you, but goes behind you and starts talking to the parent and saying,
right,
nope, they still
right.
need speech.
Right, right. And they're like the whisper things. Or, for example, there are things like your special ed teacher who may say to you, oh, you can't test now. The try isn't for another 2 more years.
right?
Right? And
Yep.
there's those kinds. And I think that for us, one of the things that we definitely started to see patterns with were also with our administrators who would oversee at the IEPs. So they would come in, we'd be ready to exit, and they would show up and they would say things like, I think you should just think about indirect services like consult. And you'd be stuck there at the IP like, ah, what do I do now? Right. So those were examples of like our school staff. And then when you think about, Carrie, I'm so glad that you mentioned the parents. It's so true because they do become so emotionally tied. And you do start to hear things like my child, even ones that are like in for an R or otherwise, my child loves coming to speech. They just love coming. And I just, or even they give their own expertise, like, I just don't think they're ready yet. Maybe
Right.
next year, right? As if they're the experts who get to make
Mhm.
that determination. Or they're fearful, like they're afraid they're going to regress. Or maybe they're afraid they're going to get teased. These are all kinds of things that we've been hearing from them. And then, like I said to you, Carolyn, we are truly our own worst enemies. And what did I mean by that? I
Yeah.
think that as speech language pathologists, we are fearful ourselves of confronting a lot of these parents and having these hard conversations. So even when you do feel like I'm ready to exit, I've got my script, I'm ready to go to the IEP. Oh, maybe not this year. And you can feel that way. And I am here to say I understand that's a real feeling. And then, I know this is going to sound crazy, but some of you out there are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes, let's just be honest, parents bring treats. Okay, like Amy,
You're right.
let's
You
be
get the
Amy,
best.
I'm just gonna say it, Amy. Who brought you treats? And you were like, listen, I love getting donuts.
You know what? Friday mornings, mom would drop little David off and she would look at me and she would be like, what do you feel like from Starbucks today? And I'd be like, well, Lisa, I would really love a grande macchiato.
I mean, listen, we
And
gotta
30
name it. We
minutes
just have to
later,
name it. Like
after
Struggle
I
the
is
used to get,
real,
discussion,
people.
yeah, I mean, I used to get tamales every Christmas, and it was hard to say goodbye to that mom. I'm not gonna lie. So I get that. And then, I mean, let's name the things. So I would also say some of us may inflate caseloads, right? And why would there be an incentive to do that? And you might be thinking, I don't know if that's really true, but let's think about it. Why would you? Are you getting a special perk like maybe you get a SLPA if your caseload is larger? Okay.
You get an
Maybe
overage.
by, right. I mean, and there's all
Yeah.
kinds of things. Sometimes you get moved to school because unless you have a certain, or you get added,
Yes.
right? And it happens. So I feel like you just have to put the cards on the table and explain that these are real reasons why speech pathologists would do this. And then lastly, Carolyn, I would say, and this is something, it's a mentality, if you will, that we leave graduate school, right? And you alluded to this at the beginning, and you're 100% right about it's almost like the plumber that walks in with his toolbox and says, where's the leaky faucet? We feel like we have to fix things, right? We leave graduate school and we've been given tons of wonderful theories and great practical ideas and tools to go out and quote fix. But there's very little conversation, very little about like, oh, what about exit? What does that even look like? It's almost like it's glossed over and barely mentioned. And so you don't even think like exit's on a horizon because it's almost never mentioned. The only time it's mentioned is if a kid has met their goal. Like, and then you're like, oh, good, I'm done. I'm good. So those are those times where I would say that you're seeing that. And then you're probably wondering, well, so what about you mentioned the student, right?
Yeah.
What does it mean by the student? Well, sometimes you've got kids, I hate to say it, that just are not motivated, right? It's like they've ditched class, right? They find every excuse in the world not to come to speech. And maybe they're just completely unmotivated, or maybe they've been coming to speech for years and working on the same skill over and over and over. And I've often said, how much do you have to bang your head against a wall if they just haven't quite gotten that skill? So those are the sort of some of
On
the
the flip, if I can add on to that, what
yeah,
I have a lot, especially being in elementary, when I've done my student input and I say, what do you think about your speech and coming? And they're like, well, I love coming. I'm like, well, what is it you want to love coming? And they're like, I get out of class. So is that
and that's
you've got
real.
those two
Yeah.
two spectrums.
That's real, by the way.
Mhm.
You have no idea. I had a kid who recently I exited and he said, please don't exit me. And I'm like, okay, what's behind that? And they said, I just love coming. And I said, I know, Miss Culligan is so lovely. I don't blame you. And she said, no, I just love getting out of class, or I love playing the games, or I love the attention, or I love the stickers. I mean, let's be honest, we are a lot of fun to be with, speech
I
pathologists.
know. I'm delightful.
We're a lot of fun. Us, the speechies are fun. So I think that
Another
they feel that.
Another one that I know that we might be up against is when they have an IEP only for speech.
Right,
And then they have other accommodations because of the speech, and now
right,
they're no longer going to be under an IEP, and then you get pressure from the district,
right.
from the
Well, I would say, I don't know how it works in Oregon, but in California, when I've had that situation and they've had accommodations, we often move them over to like a 504.
for accommodations only.
Mhm.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that is, I don't
That's sort
know.
of a way that we often will say. And Amy will, and I'm
Okay.
sure you may ask her later, but I was going to say it does still beg the question about what some of those eligibility pieces are. And so it's somewhat similar to, I would imagine, related services. Like I was thinking about OT, which I think that they too, unless there's another kind, I think speech or one of the other ones, can't provide OT services unless there's
Yeah,
another
OTs and PTs have to
right.
be
They
attached
can't
to
Same
an
stand
idea,
alone.
same
people. They can't stand
idea,
alone.
same
Yeah.
idea.
Oh, no, OT can be a 504. I've seen that too.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah.
But you can
I'd
imagine
like
the
you to know
pressure.
that.
All right. But you can imagine the pressure that we often
Yeah, we
get.
do. I mean, the
And
pressure's
that's right.
real. The struggle is real. It is.
That's
Hey,
correct.
Christine, don't think I didn't see your, sorry. I do want to, she's got a great point here. Students producing target sounds perfectly during structured activities in speech, but not always generalizing. She's curious to hear when other SLPs might recommend dismissing these students. What do you think
Yeah,
of
so
that?
that's going to lead into like questions related to eligibility and
Okay.
impact. Yeah, so And that's going to get into some of the stuff that probably Amy will talk about a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm already loving this because this conversation, I want us to be reframing dismissal. Not that it's a negative outcome, that it's
Right.
actually a clinical, ethical decision to do, right?
It's a combination of that, and then later we can talk about it, but it's also about how you celebrate a student and their effort. I think it's becomes not so much about what the student's output is, so whether they've done the art, but it's also about how much effort they're putting into it. And I think that's a really important point because I can remember, and this will be something we can of course talk about later, but just how upset the kids would feel when they wouldn't get something. It felt
Yes.
terrible, whether it was a sound or they didn't use the right word or they couldn't come up with the descriptive word or whatever it was, or the stuttering, the fluency shaping piece. And you would just see this crestfallen child or student, if you will, not being able to achieve that goal and how frustrating this. So I think that we have really reframed how we look at this. And even though we still incorporate them and include students, and we'll talk about how we include them in the therapy and that becomes part of it so that they are motivated to do this, we really focus a lot about the effort. Like you were awesome, how you put forth that effort. That's an important piece.
I want to
I feel
do
like,
a shameless plug.
yeah,
Sorry, shameless
shame
plug.
it.
My last episode was reframing the term error, and it was on speech sound patterns. Christine, I'm going to urge you to go listen to that one. So there's my shameless plug.
I
for
love that. And
speech.
Amy, will you do your thing that you mentioned about big deal, little deal?
Oh,
Ooh.
well, no, in therapy, of course, I'm letting the kids all know, what they're working on, what their targets are. And to your point, there are sometimes in this student in particular, little Julia, she's got a lateral S, not my favorite, but I pull out all the tools, all the things I can. And with this little girl in particular, we've been trying all sorts of different strategies. And it was just this week where, I had the straw and we're trying to catch the air and, boy, it's still coming out the side and I can see her little face, and I'm sitting there and I'm giving her reinforcement. Like, I love how you're trying. I love that you're sticking with me. I know this can be hard. Right. But finally I could see her little face and I just looked at her and I said, you know what? If you get the air coming out here, that's going to be great. I go, but if it's still coming out over here, I said, Julia, it's going to be okay. I said, is this a big deal, little deal? And this little 6-year-old looked at me. She's like, it's a little deal. And it just kind of like took that pressure off her because we're like kind of drill and kill and we're trying so hard, but we have those students who we know, so I just think it's really important, like the semantics that we use when we're working with our students. And that was one moment just this week that I think really made a difference that it's going to be okay if we don't get that lateral S remediated. But if anybody has any other tips for me, throw them in the chat.
Yeah. Oh, for the lateral S, you know what I always look for to make sure they don't have a posterior open bite?
Oh.
I look at, well, that's because I come from dysphagia and I'm always looking at dentition.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not saying that is the issue, but that happened. I was filling in and doing some artic for middle school and this kiddo, and I finally went, you know what, I'm going to do a full little oral mech, and sure enough, and I'm like, they'll never be able, the teeth never articulated. So that's a little one. Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
Have to take a little deep dive into that. Thank you so much.
Just a thought. But okay, so bringing us back, do you think we should talk about assessments? Because okay, I know I jumped us right into dismissal only because I'm so curious because it was hard for me. So I'm wondering if we should talk about assessment.
And by the way, Carolyn, I think we should jump into assessment.
Oh,
and
good.
then
Okay.
That's because we're so stressed about these about having now identified that what the barriers are. I'll give you tools afterwards, but go into assessment.
So can I review the barriers? We have school staff, family and caregivers, us, the SLP, and then the students.
That's right.
Okay.
We'll talk about tools after, but I do think you want to get into the assessment because this plays into the tools.
Yeah, so do you want to walk us through the importance of a legally defensible evaluation?
I do. And it's not just the assessment, but kind of the process is what I want to talk about.
Okay. Let's jump into the
Because I
process.
looked at it from, we go from testing to our report writing to that
Uh-huh.
initial IEP. And I feel like those things together are what kind of get us through that first hump of having those difficult conversations. So you've used the term legally defensible. I don't know in other districts, but I know here in Long Beach, our in-house attorney has really hammered in the that we need to have a tight, legally defensible assessment report. So Long Beach has a template. I'm sure many of you do. We're including a lot of components, the reason for assessment, the background, our testing tools, our observations. But there's a couple things that I've landed on in this process that I've evolved a little bit with in my assessment. And one of them is, we do include input, and it's, for me, it has historically been teacher input, parent input, but I now have really moved forward into getting that very valuable student input, especially after I have worked with the student for a few years and I'm looking at dismissal or we're at a point of re-eval. I just think that has been so valuable because, especially with those parents who are really struggling or the teacher who's saying A, B, and C, I feel like when they hear that student voice that, I don't want to come. I'm not motivated. I'd rather be in class, especially as we get into those middle schoolers, right? I've recently started working more with middle school and they're like, I'm missing class time when I'm coming to work with you. I had a student not the other day, but a few weeks ago, and I asked him, and he was a third grader. And I said, what do I always ask, like, what's your perspective? And this little one said, well, I think I sound just great. He's like, and we were working on S, and he goes, like I can say the word star perfectly. And he said it with a giggle.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can. No, we actually did exit him, and I had some really good conversation with his mom, and combined with his input, we made the case for we had done what we could, and it was time to exit. In addition, is what is known as the 3 prongs of eligibility.
Mm-hmm.
So when I get to my conclusion, I have lived in the land of eligibility, as I know a lot of other SLPs, and I've really just thought about ed code and do they qualify? Do they meet eligibility criteria? Check. Yes.
Yeah.
Have we used our formal tests?
Yeah, they've hit that 7th percentile. That's here in California.
Yep,
We're looking at language disorders, right? Or from the developmental norms, they're still misarticulating that sound, or they're stuttering 3 words per minute or more, whatever it might be. I'm like, check. All right. The 3 prongs of eligibility go 2 more steps beyond that. So it's not just looking at the eligibility in terms of ed code, but the second prong starts to look at, is there an adverse impact on educational performance? So that's where I start to take a different dive. That's where I'm starting to get away from that standardized assessment. And I'm looking at academics. I'm looking at social. With their academics, I'm inquiring about, how are they doing with oral presentations? Can I see a writing sample? How's their listening comprehension? Socially, I'm in there during my observations, and I'm watching them as they might be engaged in a group discussion. What does that look like? Are they participating, raising their hand, or in that pair share moment? Like I said, I'm doing observations, I'm getting record reviews, I'm getting grades, I'm getting team input, and I'm looking at rating scales. So just, again, going beyond my castle or beyond my gifta, and really looking at how is it impacting them academically and socially. And then that third prong it says, is there a need for related services to address educational need? Does this child require our specially designed instruction? And I know, you guys, we are the experts. We've come out with master's degree. We know our stuff, but sometimes there are those moments when others on the team can wear that hat, meaning we have that duplicated service. So they don't necessarily need an SLP to work on. Let's go, for example, I think about our special day class teachers. I are they writing goals for vocabulary? Are they writing goals for following directions? And I don't know about you guys, but I've literally walked into IEPs and with our behavior specialist in particular, and we are doubling down on a goal that might be off a little bit semantically, but it's the big picture is we're both working on peer interaction. We were both addressing, turn taking or whatever it might be pragmatically. And we're looking at each other like, why are we doing this? And that's where I really think it's important to think about the students, think about your team, and really collaborate to make sure we're not duplicating those services with students.
One of the words I just want to stop, sorry, that resonated with me is when you say require. Because a lot of times we hear, but they would benefit from.
Right.
We're not here. Everyone would benefit because we are amazing. We all know it. We all know it. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but when you said require, we need to remember that it's require. Otherwise they do not have access.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We become very careful because we play with the word benefit, and you're 100% right, Carolyn. We said the same thing, like, well, couldn't everybody benefit? I mean, I won't get started about how when you are doing a playground observation and how many kids you hear them out on the playground and you're going la 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 la, only because you could be putting 500 more kids on your caseload, right?
Absolutely.
So
yeah. But so those 3 prongs, again, I feel like when we've done our presentations, we call it the paparazzi shot. Like everybody starts to hold up their cameras because so many of us have just really thought about eligibility. But I think we really, really need to come back and reset and remember that the issue of impact and do they require that specially designed instruction, right? So,
talk a little bit more about duplicating services because say more words about that.
More words. Okay. Well, when they're not just a speech only and they have other services, they might be in special
or they're
day
in
class,
other programs too.
right? Or they're in RSP. I am always making
resource specialist program.
Okay, a focus classroom. Okay, or a learning center.
Right, or a special day class setting.
Okay.
Right. It's less restrictive than our special day class setting. What I'm making sure is that I am working with the team to see, if they're writing similar goals, maybe then I can pass that off to them and they can work on that area. And I would say this usually lives for me with like pragmatic language, receptive language, expressive language. I do see us being a little bit more of that expert when it comes to speech disorders, your fluency, your articulation, phonology, that sort of thing, that I often hold a little bit closer because it is more specific to my teaching. But the language piece, it can be addressed by other service providers. And I think the key to that, sharing the workload with that, is that collaboration, right?
Especially if you're looking at the standard base kinds of goals that are out there, what we're supposed to be doing. There's so much grammar, morphosyntactic skills that we're thinking about, and that's a lot of times again where the resource specialist teacher is providing a lot of support. So you don't want to be looking at the IEP saying we're both working on verbing or past tense or regular past tense and all those kinds of things. We're all working on the same things. Would be a duplicated service.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Yeah. So once now we've done our testing, we've written our reports, now it's the time we sit down at that initial IEP to present this report. And this initial IEP is so critical because this is where I live this. Every initial IEP I've done this year, I begin to do what I call planting the seed. And so what that looks like, this initial IEP this is where we're meeting the family for most likely the first time in person. We're starting to develop that relationship. And I've always said to SLPs, it's so important that we're developing relationships, whether it's with our other, school staff or with those families, and the families in particular, because this is where you're starting to build that trust. And they're looking at you and they're trusting you that you are going to enroll and take care of their little one and help them on their merry way towards those speech and language goals. And it's usually good, if they've met eligibility and they're going to get services, they're thrilled, right? We're the golden service.
Yeah.
We're speech and language. Everybody Everybody wants speech and language. So
Because we're
usually this
special
is
ed light.
yes. So yeah, it's a happy time. And I kind of take this time to pounce a little bit, where as I'm going through the assessment report with them, this is where I will start off before I get into it, really explaining school-based services versus private. And I don't know about any of you out there, but I would say 40, 50, maybe more % of my caseload go to private therapy on top of coming to school-based therapy. And so I really start to explain, how it's going to look different, why my goals might look different, why my services might look different. So I'm planting that seed, don't compare me to, Sally over at, the speech clinic that you're going to. Like, I do have a different criteria here.
Amy, if I can interrupt you, I don't know if you're about to say this, but I was about to say, and this is really the time where you really talked about least restrictive environment. This is, we have to explain what that's about. Were you going there, Amy? You were, weren't you?
Getting there. You're rushing the buffet a
I'm
little
sorry, I'm
bit.
rushing the buffet here. I'm so
Slow
sorry.
down.
I get so excited.
I know, me too. I'm wanting to jump in and I'm like, okay.
It's coming. Yes.
Okay.
So then we go through the assessment report, and then we kind of get to that last piece where I am going over, like, they've met eligibility criteria and re-emphasizing this is school-based speech therapy. And we're going to talk about in the IEP document what that's going to look like. So as we get through our IEP document, when we land on our goal section, that's where I take advantage of the time. That's where I start to plant that seed to parents that I've drafted these goals. You'll notice they're not 100%. I don't do swallowing care. So that's, yeah. So fair. So we're not writing 100% accuracy on our goals. And I said, there's a reason for that. Nobody's perfect with their speech. Nobody's got perfect communication skills, right? I also talk about here where my role is I've got a tool belt and I've got all these tools and these strategies, and I'm going to do my best to get your student to meet these goals or your child to meet these goals. And if for some reason we don't, that's going to be okay too. And I really name that. And I start to talk about acceptance in this moment, right? And it's funny, I had one parent this year where when I was saying, if we don't get this fully remediated, it's going to be okay. And this dad brought in, he's like, my friend sounds just like my daughter, And so he's like, it opens up these conversations, just that they start making connections. It's planting that seed around, like, acceptance, and that it's going to be okay, that you're trusting me again, that I'm doing my best. I am here for your child to do what I can, but I don't have that crystal ball. I wish I did, or that magic pill. But I will do what I can as a clinician to help your child progress. And I'm really careful with my wording, because we'll talk a little bit later about this, but that whole idea of fixing, right? I was in my early years so much about fixing. And when I thought more about that, it's like the little Julias, like, if I'm in that land of, like, I'm going to fix you, they start to feel like they're broken.
Right.
And we don't want that. Right. And that's heartbreaking, because I will say, I've got a lot of years under my belt, but there are some students it just doesn't click sometimes.
But think about fluency. I had Nina Reardon Reeves on twice. I know. She's like amazeballs. Anyway, she reframes the term stuttering to verbal diversity.
We use it in our report, in our thing too. So we quote Nina because we agree with that. It's such a brilliant. We love the work of Scott Yaris and Reeves. They obviously really have done a magnificent job about talking about the area of acceptance. I would say you want to just carry that out to all areas of
all areas of acceptance,
correct.
And that,
right. That's right.
And I love that you're saying we aren't here to fix.
That's correct.
I like what I also heard, Amy, when you said we're here to give you the strategies.
That's right.
Because right. We can't handhold them for the rest of their lives. We have to give them the strategies. That's what we're here to do, is to teach strategies.
Yep. And then after we go through the goals, now I've planted the seed, what a school-based SLP looks like. I've planted the seeds that we're not striving for perfection here. Now we get to the services. And this is where I'm going over, if I, what I'm looking for is this balance for your for your child to be making progress while they're still, participating in their classroom. Really talking about that idea of least restrictive environment. That's why we're not doing 5 times a week,
Yeah.
for an hour each session. But this is where I'm also talking about, again, we're not looking to, this is not a forever placement. It was at ASHA where I heard one presenter said, sometimes our services sound like a jail sentence, like it's like 2 years to life, and that's not the intent. We really should be looking at, what are those markers? Are they making progress? Okay, if they're not making progress, let's change up our strategy or let's change up our service delivery model. But when we get to that point where they're, either clean and easy, ready to exit, or where they're like, it's just not clicking, we've plateaued, whatever the reason is that, okay, there is going to be a point where we are no longer going to be continuing to recommend speech services.
So
And I
Carolyn,
also like to say here,
the big point about this is that it begins at the initial IEP.
So
it does.
starting
And the
out-
other piece too is
Mhm.
I talk about that the whole idea too, and I do try to frame it like, I don't use the ASHA. It's two years
Yeah,
to
like
life.
we're not calling him a
Right.
conflict. I get it.
We're not, this is between us here in this
Yeah.
webinar.
But we do
But
talk
what
about lifers. Yeah.
But what I do talk about is that when we do get to the time where we're looking to exit, it's going to be a time to celebration. And that celebration could be, again, the easy peasy, boom, boom, we've remediated, you're ready to go, you've met all your goals. Or mom and dad, we might be celebrating just the fact that they have really put forth good effort, a great attitude. They've tried really hard, you know what I mean? And, it's gonna be okay, even though they don't have, the perfect sentence structure, or they're still stuttering, or whatever it may be. But I really try to frame it as, hopefully we're going to get to that spot to celebrate, and that celebration might look different. Just, it'll be time will
Carolyn,
tell.
I wanted to add that one of the things that Amy and I talk about is, yes, it starts obviously at the initial IEP, but that's not where it ends, because it's even when you're working with your student in therapy, they should always know what your goal is that you're working on and that you're working on exiting, okay? And at subsequent IEPs, it's also where it is mentioned. So every annual IEP that you have, it is still something that you're talking about. It should never be a surprise to a parent when you're like, okay, remember when we talked at the first IEP about exiting, and they're like, what are you talking about? It should be something that is reoccurring throughout therapy, throughout every IEP that you end up having, and it all exchanges. You should be talking about it with your teachers, with your parents, all of the above.
I hear you. And especially like if they're saying, well, they're still having trouble in school or this thing, then we're like, perhaps there's something more.
Right.
Right. And that
You're onto something, Carolyn.
Am I? Oh, did I just step through something you
No,
guys were about
not
to
at all.
get into?
You're onto tools.
Oh,
You're onto,
okay.
like,
Oh,
yeah.
you know what? I don't want to miss our tools. Yeah.
You won't miss them. Don't
Okay.
worry. But that
Okay.
kind of is leading to what you're talking about.
Okay,
So,
I'm going to stand down and I'm going to let Amy. So we're at the IEP.
So we're at the IEP, we've gotten through the services. So I think that's basically the gist of like kind of those talking points that we want to plant those seeds to the parent. One last thing I was going to say, I had another parent where I was talking about the services and this isn't a forever placement. And she just looked at me and she's like, well, isn't that the point? So it's just like,
oh,
yes,
she got
yes,
it.
it
She's
is,
like, she understood the assignment.
Yes, she read the room. So I do love having these conversations, not just talking about, we'll work on correct placement of, I love having these more open conversations with the parents, again, because I think it's building that relationship, it's building the trust, and it's building, like I said, that trust not only to that you're going to trust me to enroll your student, you're going to trust me someday to exit your student, right?
Yeah.
So it really has kind of all these little tidbits of these things that parents start to share, and you're like, this is good stuff. And I feels like for future IEPs, it's going to make it easier for me.
And I mean, and I know that why is it still so uncomfortable?
Well, we've got to get through those barriers. So I'm going to let Laura take it
Carolyn.
away.
So we've identified there's some barriers that are at play. But here's what I'm gonna tell your speechies that are out there. You really want to think about how you cultivate a response. So once you've identified that there's these barriers, what are you going to do about it, right?
Yeah.
And because it is a very, like you said, Carolyn, uncomfortable feeling when you're in these positions, you're in these hard conversations, and you kind of don't know what to do. So folks, get ready, put your seatbelts on. Let's role play a little
Look at
bit.
me,
And
I'm
this
in.
is something, yeah, this is what I would hope from all of you. So pop in the chat if there's a tool that you find has been really effective in working with your school staff, in working with your parents and caregivers, in working with ourselves, which we'll get to, and working with students, please put it in the chat. It'd be so helpful for all of us. I would love to hear it too. But over time, I think that we've really thought about, well, what can I like whip out of my back pocket and use when I'm in one of these meetings? Well, for one thing, it is helpful to have a partner in crime. Amy is my partner in crime. So we will do role playing sometimes. She'll be saying, heading to an IEP, and she'll say, like, okay, here's what I have coming up. I want to role play with you. And we'll get to that in a second. But it's kind of a lot like what Amy said. It reminds me of when that teacher said to you, well, in my professional experience, and this is a really nice time to reflect. We are the experts in speech language pathology. We are the experts in this area, right? And like Amy said, if you trust me to enroll a child or a student in speech and language, you should trust me to exit the student in that. And these are these things like, well, quiet is not a disorder. And as we've been mentioning around the work of Nina Reeves and Scott Yaros, the importance of acceptance. So when they're saying that they're still stuttering, that's a really nice opportunity to talk about acceptance, right? And role playing. So Amy, just let's play for a second, okay? Let's pretend you're heading towards like the exit, right? You have reached your goals, or maybe the student hasn't quite achieved it. You're sitting down at the IEP, you're sharing your results. And let's say I'm the principal and I turn to you and I say, Amy, I don't know about this kid. I feel like maybe you can still provide them with some indirect services. Why don't you just put them on consult? What would you say?
Well, Principal Laura, thank you. Great question. I love that you chimed in on that. But as you know, if consult is a service, right? We got to put that on the service line. And if we've got a service, then we've got to have a goal attached to it. We've got to have a goal attached to it. We've got to have a baseline. If we have a baseline, that means we have a need. Well, good news, celebration time, this student no longer is demonstrating a need. So a consult would not be appropriate. So that's how I would handle that.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I forget. I feel like, was it Christine in the chat? Christine, if I'm naming you, I'm hoping.
Yeah, about the
Okay.
when
The
we
one
are-
who, the parents and caregivers that won't let go. And there's even ones that say we want more, right? As if more
yes.
to make it better. And so sometimes I like, and this is like one of those back pocket examples, I'll say, okay, well, when I have a stomach ache, I'm going to take medicine. But here's the thing, I'm not going to keep taking medicine just in hopes that I don't get a future stomach ache. So sometimes more is not always better. We don't look at people and say, you know, that sugar thing, you should have more of it. We never really do that. So more is not always better. And that's something that I think is such an important thing to explain to families, is that sometimes more is not necessarily in their best interest. Again, that's when you're talking at that beginning IEP about least restrictive environment and how that's the goal and getting them back there. And so I think that updating parents and caregivers on progress, well, what does that look like? Sometimes it's as simple as like writing a parent a note. So I will have these pre-written notes written out for parents and caregivers, like, your student did amazing today. You should ask them about the book that we read and ask them what their favorite descriptive word is. I bet they're going to say it was absurd. That was their favorite, but ask them about that. So getting them involved in that process. Sometimes it's a phone call home. And yes, I know we're on limited time in terms of being able to do that. So that can be harder. But having like a pre-written note is a really helpful thing. When you're thinking about your staff, like we were just talking about, that would be with those teachers in services. And I would imagine, Amy, you're school-based, so you're out there, you're doing teacher in services and maybe providing your staff with one-pagers. Like, these are the expectations of what it would qualify for a speech language disorder. And even
Can I just jump in really quick?
Jump in.
And I know some of you are hearing like staff training, like I got to get up in front of everybody and it's one more thing. I will tell you sometimes doing these one more things on the front end that might be a little more time consuming, I guarantee you on the back end are going to save you time. So for example, what I've done at the various school sites I've been at, we are lucky in Long Beach Unified, we have a very specific multi-tiered systems of support process. And I've had principals who allow me an hour to get up there and talk to the teachers. And the really important piece of this is where we are giving, like we have created, Laura alluded to, it's called a one pager that for each age grade level, it's kind of goes, and we took articulation, language. Oh my gosh.
I want in on this. Keep going.
Brain moment. But we have like a one pager because nobody has time for more than just at a glance, and it's just kind of what are the expectations at this age level, and then at the bottom we just have the red flags that you're going to look for.
Here's the thing about that, Carolyn. I don't want you to think, it's not that we're not geniuses, of course we are, but what I would actually say about this is like this can be done by any school district. This is when you want to get together with your speech team and discuss, well, what does eligibility look like? Are there some things that we can suggest as a multi-tiered system of support that are offered in these grade levels? Go ahead, Amy. Sorry.
And it just kind of grounds the expectation, of what we are working at what age, so that we don't get it starts to help that we don't get inappropriate referrals.
Right.
So doing something like that is helpful, but again, I do recognize it is time consuming on the front end.
Right. I alluded to this, Carolyn, and I'm going to go back to it. So you were like, well, Laura, you mentioned about how we ourselves can be our own
Yes.
worst enemies. And I wanted to mention this. Obviously, we talked about the fix it comment and things like that. And that is a hard one to reconcile with, for sure. But I'll also say it has a lot to do with the work of Carol Dweck she's a clinical psychologist up at Stanford University. And she talks, I'm sure many of you heard this, about mindsets, right? And about growth mindsets and fixed mindsets. And I like to think about it in our profession. Well, what does that look like? And so fixed mindsets are sort of those people that say, I'm not changing anything. Like, you know what? I don't have the time for this. I don't have the time to test. Who can add one more thing to what I'm doing, right? Those of you that are out there, you're part of the growth mindset group, all right? You're willing to say, I recognize that I've got a lot on my plate. I do. But I want to change some things about this. What do I need to do? And in order to get to that place of that growth mindset, you really do have to do some soul searching. You really do have to do some reflections. You do. You have to start to say, what do I want to change about what I do to make it better? I mean, Amy and I, we've had some really good chats about like what that looks like, right? Things that we used to do that maybe we don't do anymore, right? And so like Amy, are there things that you can remember? I mean, I don't know, when you're doing things like this, you're smiling. So my guess is that yes, indeed, there's some things that you used to do.
I didn't know we were going to go this route. All good. Yes, as an SLP who's been practicing since the early 2000s, I don't know what our age range looks like out there, but it used to be all about oral motor, and I'd start every RTIC session, and I'd be like, okay, let's click our tongue, let's wag it. And guess what, folks? There is no efficacy behind that's going to help with
young ones are going
placement.
Right. Right.
We did it. We also used to write.
We all did it.
For 2 minutes during 4 reciprocal interactions, student will maintain eye contact.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
by the way, I will
Oh.
admit, and it's really hard to say this here on this whole webinar, that's very hard for me to say, but think about stuttering. I'd sit there with my clicker. There you go again. There. Can you imagine how that child feels? Like, I can't even look at myself in the mirror that I did that. But I thought I was like, well, in grad school, that's the way they taught us to work with that. And we know
What's
better.
that saying? When we
Yes,
know better, we
That's
do
correct.
better.
It's a Maya Angelou saying
That's
that.
it,
Guys,
yes.
do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better.
Do
So that
better.
is right. And I'll tell you something, Carolyn. I'll tell you a secret, and now the
Oh,
rest of you get to know it. So, when we were doing this presentation and we were talking about all the various examples that we did, I said we were obviously talking about acceptance. And I said to Amy, oh, there's this marvelous book on articulation, like Huey Fawadni Wat. Like, it's such a cute little book. It talks about the
oh, yep,
R, and
I know that one.
all these people use it. And Amy made a face. Amy, will
Oh,
you
that.
explain how your growth mindset kicked in?
Well, and I think this is a really important aha moment again, just around that whole idea when we're thinking about exiting and so long living in the land of perfection and meeting the goals that again, early 2000, those were rough times for me. Where that book was out and one of the teachers had suggested like, oh, look at this would be a great one for your speech students. And I read through it, I was like, in what world would we be celebrating somebody who at the end of the story was the hero and but still couldn't say their R's, And I was like, absolutely not. And then fast forward when we were having our conversation, I'm like, oh, good grief. I'm like, that was a fixed mindset that I had back then. And I was thinking like success equated to perfection. And so that's gone from my head now. Yeah, I was like,
And
couldn't believe that. I
I
would
think that's
not
an
have
important
anything to do
thing.
with that.
I think learning how to talk around acceptance, I think including with ourselves and how we used to do things and how we do it differently now. And finally, that tool with our students, and Amy said this, and I just want to reiterate it. We really want to create agency with our students
Mm.
and including their input in our assessments in the process. How do you feel like you're doing? And it's really painful to watch a student who is not necessarily accomplishing the goals that they had hoped. So when you've shown them that articulation hierarchy, and forgive me for those of you that are out there that are thinking, oh, there's so many other kinds of disorders that we're dealing with. Artic sometimes is the easiest example to give. But when you look at that Artic example and they're not quite at that conversation level, and somebody had mentioned this, it's frustrating, right? They're frustrated. And to have them continuously hitting their head is just an unfair thing to do. And by allowing them the opportunity to say, do you still feel like speech is that's helping you and you want to continue with it? Is it making a difference in terms of like whether you raise your hand in class or whether you're socializing with your peers? I think that it really is important that they're able to say, actually, no, I participate just as much and it doesn't impact me at all with going out on the field and playing kickball, right? So that's the important thing, and including that in your report.
Okay, light bulb, hold up for a second. You just said some things that just hit me heavy. One, when we're talking about student input, I'm thinking about evidence-based practice. And part of that is like it would say client perception. And a lot of times we always take the parent per proxy, but adding the student in there with their perception. And then here's my Laura, I am dying right now. But when you're saying we ask them, yeah, if they're not as gregarious and always answering questions, and you ask them why, and it's not because of their speech impairment or not because of their language or not because of their verbal diversity or what have you, and they say, well, actually, I'm not comfortable speaking out loud just because I don't enjoy that.
Yeah, and that goes along with the quiet piece. And I think accepting kids for who they are. Not every kid wants to go run and be in a lunch group and initiate conversations. It reminds me how kids are forced. Like, I see they're by themselves at recess. Well, maybe they're choosing to be by themselves at recess. And guess what? That's okay. Not everybody has to be forced to be doing certain things. And I think
Another
that's an
thing, if
important
I can
piece.
add that I've talked to parents about is like, and as a parent myself, I've got 2 teenagers, help me. But you do go through different stages in life and see
Mhm.
there's times when they are with different peer groups and times where they do pull back. And I do have just this belief that kids at different points in time, they'll find their people. And it may not
Yes.
be at elementary. It may not be till college. Um,
Well,
Yeah.
I'll just add that I think it's really important to accept people for who they are, and that's what it's all about. It's about acceptance, and not everybody has to be the loudest one in the room, and
And
that's
if I can
okay.
add one little more
Yeah.
tidbit, I
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
in New York, and I was at their net. They have a program called the Nest program, and at this program, and it's a program that they had developed for people on the autism spectrum, and they had autistic adults come and speak to us, which was the first time I've ever had that perspective. And it was another moment for me where these people were coming up and they were talking about their experiences in speech therapy that was actually excruciating, that they were made to speak on a preferred topic, that they
Oh,
were
yeah.
made. And
Mm.
I just think about some of the things we've done, and I feel like we do things with the best of intent, but I do think we are, like I said, this is a continuing, and we are evolving around verbal diversity, neurodiversity. And I think it'll be interesting to see where our field heads, but having that perspective on the back end from those who had received therapy from SLPs, who again, were probably had the best of intents, it was really hard for them.
Can I share? We have a Christine.
I
Yeah.
saw Christine's comment, and my response, or what I wanted to say, Christine, is how would you normalize imperfections? I would say that's the important thing, is how do you normalize it and like help your student recognize that imperfections are just are a part of like the world. We're all imperfect. Nothing is perfect out there. And I think that that goes alongside, if you will, the acceptance piece. But
I,
normalizing imperfections is the piece, and having them understand that. So what will you do in therapy to help them see that
and I think
imperfections are fine?
Sorry, I was going to say, and I think beyond therapy, that's where I would consider doing like a whole class lesson so that it's greater than just them understanding acceptance, right? And differences, because it's not just about speech and language differences. There's all sorts of differences, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
people we're going to
Mm-hmm.
encounter in
Sure.
this world. And so I think doing a whole class lesson where everybody can be on the same page and is talking about, yeah, it's different. Yeah, I know somebody who, has a limp, or somebody who, you know what I mean? I can't come up with great examples right now, but you know what I'm saying? Like where it is like we just are accepting differences all around, and there's people all around us that have differences, and they are successful. They have
Yeah.
families. They have jobs and careers, and and they're living their best life. And
There's a lot of books around not just for obviously parents or for educators, but also for kids. And I think that that's another way of seeing it. And I think that Amy's point about if everybody sort of recognizes it, that's sort of that normalizing it piece. I think that they don't really just see themselves as these isolated students that are impaired per se, and rather, it's everything. I mean, I often will say to kids, like, you can't change the freckles that are on your face, or you can't change, this is who we are. Right? This is just a part of the kind of things. Yes, you could change the color of your hair or maybe get contact lenses to change your eyes. But at the end of the day, this is who we are as people. I'm never going to be able to change certain aspects of who I am. And finding ways to find the beauty in that, finding the strengths in that, I think are the most important pieces.
Oh,
Like
thank
what's
you.
beautiful about your student.
Oh, thank you for that. And I'm looking at the time, and I know we're towards the end, and I am left with even more questions, and I don't want to let you go. But I'm very excited to share something with everybody. But I want to say thank you, Laura.
Oh,
Thank you,
thank you.
Amy. This is amazing. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. But I want to say, that I am so excited because I mean, who else? You guys listening, do you want to hear more from Laura and Amy? I think everyone's going to be like, yes, 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 please. Don't worry, y'all, because I want to tell you guys a little thing that this summer, July 18th and 19th, I will be hosting a back to school with School of Speech virtual, see, they're already saying yes, virtual conference. And honestly, I'm just as excited as you guys about this conference. So if you've listened to other episodes of School of Speech and thought, wow, I really wish I could spend more time learning from this guest, well, guess what? We're going to learn more. And Amy and Laura will be part of this virtual conference as well. I'm bringing together some of our most popular School of Speech guests for a 2-day focused entirely on helping school-based SLPs start the school year to feel more prepared prepared, more organized, more confident. We're talking about confidence today, right? We'll talk about everything from streamlining our systems, stronger writing goals, interventions, dismissals, y'all, more. So all of our presenters are going to be familiar voices. So if you are looking for some practical ideas, fresh perspectives, and a little boost, please join us. And you can find more details on school speech therapy PD, and it's going to be called Back to School with School of Speech, because August is coming for all of us. But anyway, again, Laura, thank you so much. Amy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Oh no, and I want to thank everybody listening live for joining us today. And not to forget that if you are listening live, I want to make sure you get credit. Get onto your Speech Therapy PD account and fill out all those modules, including the one that says complete course, to make sure that you get that. Okay, and I hope to see everybody on the next episode of School of Speech, as well as this summer, because normally I take July off, but I was so excited I really wanted to do this. So I hope to see you in July as well.